Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, COVID-19 Business Strategies, How Agents Can Help Protect the Health of Clients' Businesses in the New Economy, brought to you by Channel Partners. Before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help button on your player console to receive assistance in solving common issues. We welcome your questions during today's event. And in order to submit your questions, please type your question into the Q&A widget on your screen and then hit submit. We'll be answering as many of these questions as possible during the Q&A that will follow the main presentation, but please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we'll add them to the queue. If at any time you're having audio difficulties or issues with advancing of your slides, please hit the F5 key to refresh your webcast console. Please also be aware that today's sessions are being recorded and will be available on channelpartnersonline.com later today for you to review. You will be notified by email when the on-demand webinar is available. Today's webinar is being sponsored by Oracle, and our speakers today are Howard M. Cohen, a senior consultant at HMC right now and a veteran of the IT industry, as well as Max Silber, Vice President of Mobility and IoT for Mattel. And with that, let's hand things over to you, Howard.
Thank you very much, Jen. And hello to everybody out there in Internet land. As Jen mentioned, today's presentation is about coming back from COVID-19, helping to protect your clients' businesses in the new economy. Now, I want you to stop and think for a moment. You're an IT manager and you're in your data center talking with friends. And all of a sudden you're told, okay, we've made a decision. I want you to move everybody to working from home. Now, if everybody is a couple of people, that's really no mean feat, but it's doable. I was speaking yesterday to somebody who has 40,000 users that he's responsible for. And he just instantly moved them to working from home. He didn't have any choice. So amazing things are happening and people are doing amazing things. And I'd just like to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about how you can get help in doing some of those amazing things. First, I'd like to take you back about 30 years. Some of you may remember a little network server provider named Novell. Novell was first, and during its long tenure in the 1990s, Robert Frankenberg was their chairman and CEO. Well, in the middle of the 90s, about November of 1994, Mr. Frankenberg was speaking at the Massachusetts Software Council, and he said something very prophetic. Work has become an activity, not a place. People talk about going to work as if it's a destination, somewhere to go. But the reality is that you get to work, start working. And since they were in the age of telecommuting, according to Mr. Frankenberg, everybody was. The reality of it is that telecommuting really didn't catch on. Some people worked from home, but not the majority, very few. And it sounded like a great idea at the time, but come travel with us 26 years later to the very present, and now working from home is upon us. That company I spoke to yesterday that moved 40,000 users to home was by no means alone. Think about the millions upon millions of people in this country who, in very short order, started working from home and all the things that they had to go through to make that happen. Now, you may be thinking, well, yeah, okay, but it's a temporary condition. You know, eventually, somehow, we're going to get a vaccine and we're going to get everybody okay with COVID and we'll move on from there. But it's worthwhile noting that companies like Twitter just announced that from now on, everybody who works for Twitter works from home. There will be offices available for them in the buildings like this one that they occupy, but they don't have to come to them. They can just come to them and use them if they need to. But they want everybody working from home. And if you think that Twitter's alone, not close. Gartner did a quick study of 317 companies, and 3/4 of them were talking about moving anywhere from 500 to 100% of their people to working from home permanently. And this is just a small sampling, a short list. A lot of companies are talking about it for a lot of really good reasons. So let's go back to that data center and rejoin our IT manager. What was he doing at the time? Well, probably he was in the middle of migrating from on-prem to the cloud. And he was checking all of his equipment, making sure that everything was moving smoothly. And no, this is not his equipment. But then all of a sudden, with no warning, he was suddenly whisked out of his data center, whisked off those premises, not by alien abductors, but by the pandemic. It was very sudden. The migration might have been at any point. And now suddenly they're no longer in the data center. It's very hard to get into the data center. It's life-threatening to get into the data center. And so what's going to happen next? Well, the fact is that what will probably happen next is that migration they were working on will be accelerated. It's going to go faster. Yes, they have users out there. They're all working from home. Somebody has to make sure that they get continuous support, continuous service, and continuous access to the network. That doesn't go away. That responsibility doesn't end just because they're working from home. Matter of fact, it may get even more challenging. Somebody's got to be concerned about security. I mean, not for nothing, but you're working in an environment where every endpoint is now mobile. And we all know that mobile endpoints are the most vulnerable of all. So security has suddenly become a heightened interest. The network itself has to be maintained. We have to make sure that everybody has access, that everybody's bill is paid, that everybody is, whatever carrier they're on, wherever they happen to be, their service continues going. And of course, we have to worry about the data. It may be that we can't use the on-premise data storage anymore, if there even is any. We're now going to have to fully trust cloud-provided storage and cloud-provided backup. So it's a very different picture. And it's got to move a lot faster because those people are home and they're working. And we want to keep them that way so that our company doesn't go the way of so many other companies that have fallen on hard financial times because of this pandemic. Another thing you need to be concerned about is application delivery. Now that everybody's on a mobile device and you don't even know what mobile device they may be on, you've got to make sure that they can use the applications they need to use to get their job done. While we're talking about people need to work together. So you've got to make sure they have the right tools to achieve great collaboration without the luxury of wandering over to a conference room to talk to each other. They've got to be able to have an experience where they feel like they're all together, even though they really aren't. What you're faced with, bottom line, is that there's not going to be face-to-face communication for the time being, and maybe forever. What's going to be normal in the future is face-to-face over video. And that takes some getting used to. It takes some training, takes some acclimation, some acculturation, and you're going to be looked to lead that, make sure that everybody can do it. So the migration has not gone away. It's gotten faster. Oh, and then there's those pesky senior executives who are working from their homes, their big, beautiful homes up in the hills. They have only one concern, and that concern is managing the activity of all these people. How do we know they're getting anything done when they work from home? I'm sure you've all heard that at one time or another. And the fact is that your best friend will probably be workflow automation. Have everybody in a workflow automation system where they can report their results. And hopefully your boss is enlightened enough to measure people by their results and not by the time they arrive and leave. But let's continue pursuing. What we're pursuing is productivity. And that is the biggest concern for your executives. It's always the biggest concern for your company because productivity yields profit. So how are you going to make sure that everybody has everything they need to be as productive as they can be in a world where your executives feel like, well, the farmer's shadow is the best fertilizer? It's a great old saying. What it means is as long as the farmer is close enough to the field to cast his shadow over it, or her shadow over it, they're close enough to manage the situation. And honestly, that's probably the way most executives, most managers feel. They've got to be close to the action. They've got to be close to the people. Otherwise, the people will probably not work. They will probably not get anything done. And it's a sad statement, but it's the feeling of a lot of executives today. Well, what you got to tell them at this point is forget about it. You're not going to be in the same space as the people you work with. You're going to be separated from them, and for some time to come. This is a time when you really need to start to think about why you were making your transition to cloud computing in the first place. Because you're going to have to do a lot of work reminding your executives, reminding management that you were migrating to the cloud for a lot of good reasons. For example, you don't want to buy equipment anymore. You don't want to buy more servers and storage and stuff like that every 3 to 5 years. It's expensive. It's harrowing. You might make the wrong choice at any given time. A lot of people have really benefited tremendously financially from eliminating CapEx. No more capital expenditures. Let's transition as many of them as possible to operating expense, OpEx, and forget about CapEx. OpEx is periodic. You pay usually every month or every quarter, sometimes every year. But you eliminate so much. You eliminate so many different expenses. You're no longer renting a data center. You barely need one. You just need some place for the communications equipment if your people are even in the building. Since you don't have any equipment anymore, you don't have to pay to power that equipment or cool it. You don't have to keep the data center cool to accommodate the equipment. Because you don't have equipment anymore, you don't have to maintain equipment you don't have. So no more maintenance expense on the equipment itself. And you don't need anybody to manage the network. Now that's being done for you by professionals at the cloud data center. Maybe the most stress reduction comes from the fact that you personally and your team are no longer responsible for physically making sure that data is backed up consistently every day. Just about every reliable cloud service has backup provisions that far exceed anything you could do yourself. So what have you accomplished? You've managed to shift the management burden to somebody else. You no longer have to manage your IT. And the reality is you're not in the IT business. You didn't go into that business. You didn't sign up for that. But you found yourself having to be in the IT business because the business required it. Now, yeah, the business still requires it, but you've moved it somewhere else, and now you can shut down your data center. Get rid of it. You don't have to run it anymore. Everything that I just listed, all the things you have to do in terms of managing continuous access and continuous security, continuous data backup, those are now mandatory. Okay? You don't have the luxury of missing a day because it's all out in the cloud where you have the perception of less control. However, this is good news because the fact that these things are mandatory means that they're consistent. They happen all the time. And why is that? Because as they get used to having all their people at home, you'll find that executives are already discovering what Frankenberg knew 26 years ago, that working from home increases productivity, doesn't decrease it, it increases it. First of all, most employees tend to start their day at home the time that they would ordinarily start their commute. And depending on where they live, it could be a half hour, it could be 2 hours, it could be anywhere in between. They have that time to work now instead of to sit there traveling and reading a newspaper. So that's good. Oh, by the way, they continue working until they would ordinarily get home. So there's another half hour to 2 hours on that end. You get stretch days all the time, and nobody's asking them to do this, but it has been found that most people who work from home, they want to get things done, and they're happy to work the extra time. They're also happy to work in an environment where usually there are fewer distractions. Yes, if you have small children, there's probably some distraction. Hopefully your partner takes care of those children, or you have someone to take care of those children because you used to go to work. Well, now you have fewer distractions. Why? Because in the office, you had people coming in to talk to you. You had people asking you questions, tapping you on the shoulder, want to grab a cup of coffee, and it's the normal, typical office working day. It's full of distractions, full of interruptions, and they're gone. Along with them is a lot of the fatigue that you had. Yes, fatigue that was generated during the day, but if you're like me, my commute was always the most fatiguing part of my day. It was just, now, of course, that was in the New York market, where commuting is a harrowing experience no matter what. But most people report that they feel fatigued after they've commuted. That's why you need a cup of coffee when you get to the office and when you get home, or maybe something stronger. The other thing, amazingly, is there's reduced stress. You will find that not having to deal with office politics, not having to deal with informal interactions that may be frustrating all day long, they're gone. And so people have more control over their stress. They can stop in the middle of the day, take a break, meditate, relax. So there tends to be reduced stress for those who work at home. And of course, the last bullet flew up all by itself. There are reduced costs. Let's talk about those reduced costs, okay? As we mentioned before, the first one is owning equipment. I have a tricky mouse. You don't have to own servers and storage anymore. You really don't even have to spend on client devices. If you're working in a BYOD environment where everybody brings their own device and you just make sure that they're compatible with your network, they're responsible for their device. And that also takes a lot of cost off of your budget. There are all the data center savings that we just reviewed a moment ago, all the power and the heating and everything, cooling and so forth. There are all the physical plant costs of rent and, maintenance on the actual property itself. What you get along with it also is the improved ability to manage your telecom expense. Why? Well, for one thing, you're not operating a telephone network in your building anymore. So all of that goes away. You're really just managing internet service, perhaps a few long lines, but literally everybody is using their own internet service to get connected to the servers that are at some cloud data center. You've really minimized your management burden. You don't have to worry about these things anymore. And at the end of the day, you will find yourself managing far fewer carrier accounts. What I'm trying to impress upon you, I think it's important to think about, is that working from home is the new digital normal. And it's going to be for some time to come. The good news is all the things we just talked about, all of the, reducing the number of carriers, reducing the infrastructure, reducing the costs, increasing the pleasure and the experience for your employees and your customers. All of that is viable, and there's great help out there. Great help to make it easier for you to accomplish all of this. And to tell you more about that, I would like to introduce my friend Max Silber from Met-Tel. Max?
Thank you, Howard. I appreciate it, and appreciate you having me on, and channel partners having me on as well. Wanted to share really, our experiences over the last few months. Certainly for years now, I've been using words in IT or talking with corporations around IT. Words like impactful and disruptive. I don't think any of us ever thought of impactful and disruptive from a perspective of a pandemic, but it really has been a game changer. I think if anything, it's actually opened the eyes of most senior executives in just about every vertical around the country that not only that they need mobility as a necessity to run their business, but also the fact that they're not actually losing, as you mentioned, productivity by having people not come into an office. There's a tremendous amount of solutions out there from a software perspective. We actually use some ourselves that allow us to see levels of productivity, and always happy to talk about those in greater detail in other chats as well. But that's really what we've seen as a significant change in the industry and a significant change in the mindset of executives that are now really embracing all these tools. I personally, and I run the mobility team or business unit within Met-Tel, and when we all, went very, very suddenly and quickly, like most of us, to a work from home environment, I knew we had those tools in place, and we started using them a lot more religiously than we had in the past when they were more of a nice to have. But getting the mindset of more traditional business leaders, like in my case, my boss, who's the CEO of Met-Tel, the best thing I did was I actually got on a video chat with our CEO, we use Microsoft Teams for that, and actually showed him the dashboards I use that shows activity of everyone on our team. We can see very quickly email activity and all kinds of other appointment activity, just to be able to really measure productivity. And I think once you show that it can be done, and it can be done in a better format than the traditional, let's all go to an office and work from an office. I think I saw that eye-opening experience in him that then I saw in many of our large enterprise customers that have to go through that same process. So mindset certainly has a tremendous amount to do with it, but certainly, kind of a brave new world. And I'm going to give you some real examples of what we're seeing, where we're seeing obviously the most demand for in mobility services, where we see certain verticals going, and then what we can arm you folks in the channel with to have in your tool chest as you're going out and having those conversations with your customers. Before I do that, though, I would not forgive myself, and I certainly wouldn't forgive, or certainly the salespeople at Met-Tel won't forgive me if I don't, at the very least, share our mobility promo that we've been running since January of 2020. It has been incredibly impactful in the channel community. We've gotten a tremendous surge of opportunities starting January when we first launched this promotion, and it's going to continue until December 31st of 2020, and this is on top of everything that we were already paying quite a bit down to the channel for both upfronts on mobility services as well as residual. This is actually on top of that, so it's our specific 2020 promo in addition to our traditional commission structure. So talk to a Met-Tel representative or to your master agent if you work through a master agent, and they should have all the details to make sure you could take advantage of that as well. And with that, I wanted to share some key stats around what we're seeing, certainly from a service provider perspective. First and foremost, and I know it's kind of a loaded sentence. The world is changing rapidly. We've seen changes in days and weeks that we used to see in years. Let me just start with that. To give you some examples from some of these quotes, mobile hotspot usage up 60%. That was reported by T-Mobile looking at overall mobile hotspot usage. To get to 60% requires typically an innovation of a technology. That means the last time that happened, when we had such a huge surge, and that surge happened over a year or a year and a half, was when we upgraded cellular users from 3G to 4G LTE. So that's the type of event it takes for mobility usage to go up so significantly. AT&T, and you can see it on the Fierce Wireless stat below that, a little bit to the left, AT&T actually saw a uptick of Wi-Fi calling up by 76%. That basically means people using mobile devices in their homes using the Wi-Fi calling feature of the device, up 76%. That tells us that for the most part, the mobile phone has now replaced the traditional hosted, desktop device that we all used to use day in and day out, and certainly has been for the last 3 or 4 months now. So these are real industry-changing stats. When we talk to customers about terms like digital transformation and disruptive technologies, this pandemic has fast-forwarded that conversation by 10 or 20-fold as far as speed. And we are instantly thrust from where we were as technologists to where the world now needs to go quickly in order to be able to, first and foremost, sustain the business that they're in, and then long-term be able to future-proof and protect themselves against changes in the overall economy. This pandemic didn't just change the last 3 or 4 months of how things are going to function. Like I said, to some people, it opened up their eyes to doing things differently. To others, it's more about preparing for what they believe will be back in the fall when we should have another spike without having a cure, without having any way to fight a virus. And it also introduced the concept that the world hadn't been faced with for many years, which is that another one could potentially develop, that this potentially is not the last time we're going to see a virus that we don't have any specific antidote for. So businesses need to really protect themselves, and they need to really prepare themselves for how they deliver overall in their service industry or whatever it is that they need to do. And we're seeing something that, again, we haven't seen in years. We're seeing a huge spike in things like telehealth. It's becoming a new norm where you may have never used your mobile device to have a one-on-one session with your physician instead of going into an office and taking a half a day off of work and going through that whole process. Telehealth is becoming much more regularly used. A significant spike in healthcare that healthcare has been reporting on using those devices. And again, you have to remember, those devices aren't just on the patient level. There's also a physician or a caregiver that has a mobile device, and that mobile device needs to be secured, needs to be HIPAA compliant to protect all your patient data, and that's really becoming the new norm. We're seeing it in telehealth. We're seeing it, obviously, if you have children, you've seen it in telelearning. That's becoming the new norm for the classroom. And we're also seeing it across the board in verticals like delivery and distribution that is, typically more old technology verticals and industries have really been thrust into, 2020 and have to completely change their businesses over virtually overnight in order to survive in this new economy. The majority of the requests we've had coming in and again, this is a moment in history and we don't see these as often, but certainly within mobility, this is one of those moments in history where we could not be any busier. Every single vertical, every single company we've ever engaged with or wanted to engage with has come in through the channel in one format or another, asking for us to help them streamline the overall process of delivering mobile devices to end users, either ones that are homebound or ones that need to have that company-issued technology now in order to continue to do their job. And they've also come back to us and said, how do we streamline, how do we generate savings, and what do we need to do to get there? And that's been obviously, that is something that we do as a wholesale provider, a mobile wholesale provider across all the major networks in the U.S. And it's something that we've helped at this point in a matter of months, hundreds of new corporations just in a matter of months streamline their organization and really help them with the savings component of it. And of course, lastly, they want to prepare for the future. This is not a temporary state of mind. This is the new norm. This is the way things are going to be for a very long time, and they want to prepare for it. So if they're making the investment or they're making the change for savings, they want to make sure that they can maintain that state for all existing users and then for any new users that enter the organization, hopefully as a lot of these verticals start to get into more of a steady state post kind of that hold period that we had, and then the resurgence as things started to open up again. Two key terms that we're seeing develop and something you should be speaking to your customers about from a requirement perspective. The first is touchless-everything. Think of traditional transactions that you use yourself every day. We used to always hand someone our credit card for checkout at a store or at a restaurant. We all have technology built into our mobile devices, and some of us use it regularly like myself. Some of us still have that little bit of a trust curve that we're not sure if we could trust it. But a lot of this very high security, whether it's Bluetooth or NFC technology, is already available in most of the devices that are out in the field today. So it's about changing the process, making sure the retailers are armed with having the ability to accept forms of payments that are touchless, but also making sure that end users adopt this type of technology when it's done, for example, as part of a workflow within the vertical, within a corporation or organization. And the same applies for anything else that you touch pretty much every day. How you access facilities, how you go past security. Again, the concept is, if you work in a big building like where I used to work 3 months ago in our headquarters in downtown New York, the way to enter the building is through a set of turnstiles that's a card that I have to touch to the turnstile for it to let me in, to give me building access. Same thing with doors and everything else. The reality is, though, that if I ever lost that card, anybody else could pick it up and use that card to access the building, certainly for short term until I realize I've lost it and have our HR and facilities folks disable it and give me a new one. But the concept of using biometrics on your device, your smartphone, is nothing new. In fact, for many months now, probably about 6 months, I've been using my phone not to enter my building because that's not a feature, but to actually get into the subways in New York as part of my commute. I would touch the back of the phone. It reads my fingerprint, so it's a much more valid way to authenticate from a security perspective. And then I'd put that device using NFC near the pad that basically allows the turnstile to turn and let me into the subway system. So it's a technology that's been out there for a while. It's a technology that's now being adopted at a larger scale. But again, these are the components you have to think of when you think of your customers' needs for things like building access, and payment exchange, and how does that integrate into issuing smartphones, not just so people can talk and text and use the data, but what other applications are part of this touchless everything requirement that we're seeing more and more. And the other one is Tele-everything. Everything, as I mentioned earlier, is from doctor's visits to I have three kids at home right now going through the school system. We have, 3 separate sets of meetings for classroom meetings every day, and using Google Classroom for assignments and everything else. It is becoming, quite frankly, the new norm. We've actually folded into that requirement as well, because many school districts have approached us to help them with deployment of whether it be tablets and Chromebooks, to just augmenting existing Chromebooks with secure-based connectivity. That's basically, and I'll explain a little bit more later when I describe one of our products. But the way to deliver LTE as a MiFi, just popping a SIM into a MiFi device, but locking down what, in this case, students can and cannot access off of a Chromebook. So it's a network-based restriction, but again, this is all part of how you deliver services, but how you deliver them in a way that's also compliant, because just like healthcare has HIPAA compliance, the school systems are required by law to provide education, but they're also required by law to restrict what students can use those connections for. So you can't just take the SIM card out of a MiFi device and pop it into your iPad and start, playing Fortnite or watching Netflix movies on it. It needs to all be locked down on the network layer as well and restricted. And we do a lot of that for school systems today. So that's been an interesting increase that we saw, obviously, just as just around the beginning of March, when this became very real. And the key challenges we're seeing with the Tele-everything requirement is, the first is, how do you humanize that virtual experience for the customers, meaning your customers are delivering services in one form or another to end users. How do you humanize that concept of a virtual experience, and how do you arm that entire workforce with the tools to be able to do that remotely now? And that's one of the key challenges we're seeing, and I'll share some real examples with you on how that's actually being done, and maybe something for you to discuss with some of your customers, depending on the verticals that you work in. And the first one is, and this is, try to think of everything from the human perspective. Do you really, even though things are opening up, how comfortable are people really with walking into stores and trying on 5 or 6 or 7 different pieces of clothing? Kind of think in the back of your mind, I wonder who else tried this on, how well were they feeling that day? Did they have a temperature? If they didn't have a temperature, could they still be infectious? And now I'm putting this jacket on myself. So there has been this developing technology for augmented reality, and we're seeing that now being implemented in pop-up shops as well. And the pop-up shop can be a small location. Pop-up shop can also be your own house. If any of you have seen those commercials or bought one of those exercise mirrors, it's actually a mirror that has a video stream built into it. Potentially retailers, something to think about, could implement incorporating their sales into that same mirror. And now all of a sudden you can put on a type of jacket in your closet, and you can use the mirror to actually change things like the color of the jacket you're trying on, give you options around different shirts as you're looking in the mirror. It can even, as you're wearing it, change colors and change shapes. So again, how are we going to humanize it? How are we going to make it a more personal experience? But certainly with augmented reality, we've actually seen this being done and now being escalated as a technology to deploy, because it's one thing to go on Amazon or go into your favorite retailer online and look at something that you might want to buy But then there's always the thought of, well, I'm going to buy it and they're going to ship it to me, and then I'll try it on, and maybe it won't fit the way I like it, or the color won't look as good on me. I'd really like the ability to do more than just look at it as a picture. I'd like to feel what it's like to try it on. And to share with you, I actually did that recently. In fact, I needed to get new eyeglasses, seeing as I'm staring at my computer probably about 15, 16 hours a day. And I actually went to one of the newer online retailers for eyeglasses. And what makes them unique, or certainly unique to me, is they actually implemented this technology, and they have glasses that you can actually try on your face just by turning on the camera feature. And you can even turn your face left and right, and you could see what a specific frame looks like on your face. So you can make a buying selection that's much more personal. It's not just a picture of someone trying on eyeglasses. It's actually you, and it's a live visual, so that you can see as you turn your head what glasses look like on your face from different angles as well. And that's just not an overly simplistic, but that's a somewhat basic way of implementing augmented reality, and it's being done very successfully through a variety of online retailers. This is now taking it to the next level where it's becoming more personal. But that's just one example of how retailers are using augmented reality. The other one is when you start to think about things like fine goods, jewelry, watches, things that people haven't been so quick to buy recently, or they like to go into a store and actually try it on, see what it would look like on them. And you've got a variety of high-end retailers. We actually support one of the biggest ones in the country that own most of the jewelry stores you're probably familiar with, like Jared and Kay's and all the other ones in all the major strip malls around the country. And we're toying with the idea of actually sending out VR glasses so that you can see what specific items look like on you, and you can essentially virtually shop and have that virtual shopping experience. So another good use of technology and implementing how we're changing that overall shopping experience and making it safer, obviously, for the consumer that is concerned with health. The last one, which is I think is good to share, is the concept of virtualizing that personal shopper. So for months now, certainly in stores in my area, and we've been New York pretty heavy hit, but for months now, people have not been able to walk into a store, which means they haven't been able to talk to a shopping consultant to give them ideas or recommendations. I mean, you can always go online and you can try to make selections around suits or shirts or bathing suits or whatever you want to buy, but sometimes it's nicer to actually have that human interaction. And one thing we've been working on with many retailers, because we do a lot of work with retailers nationwide, is how do you also not only give mobile devices out to the users, but implement a complete experience of a personal shopper talking to you as you're going through that shopping experience online. So click a button for a chat or a voice chat, and they can't see all the details about you, but they can see things like what's your customer number, and then they can also see shopping history, similar to what Amazon does, and say, well, looks like you bought that blue suit 3 months ago. Did you like it? Did you like the way it fit? If you like the way it fit, I have 2 or 3 other brands that we carry that maybe would be a great fit for you. So again, you're humanizing a very digital experience, and by doing that, you're not only attracting the audience that traditionally are typically younger, more encompassing and more kind of accepting of new technology, but now you're actually grabbing the audience that still used to only shop at the store, at the brick and mortar location. So it's about making that overall change, but doing it in a way that's smart, that allows those individuals that used to be in the stores to actually be able to provide that same personal human experience to help those shoppers actually go through a checkout process. Just some quick steps to go over with your customers on how to develop a plan as you're having these conversations that I wanted to share. First and foremost, identify the most critical engagement of Virtualize. So if it's a retail storefront, how are you going to engage with customers that have now shifted a lot of the purchasing to online? And that's been another, huge transformation. I think I used to see a UPS or a FedEx truck make a route one time in my neighborhood. I think I see each of those trucks make at least 4 routes within my neighborhood every single day. So the overall experience is changing to an online experience. So I would sit with your customers, identify the most critical component that needs to virtualize, and then figure out, what are the components that you need to do that effectively. The second is, I would say, find the money, don't spend the money. What I really mean by that is most customers' mobile bills that we look at, and we have been looking at for years, but certainly the ones we've looked at over the last 3 months since this started, we're able to find the money within the mobile bill to pay for some of these innovations and efforts. We save, on average, around 20% to most customers. So if you think of a customer invoice that's, $50,000, that's a lot of money. 20%, gives you $10,000 a month to be able to spend in transforming that model and virtualizing the most important segment of the business. So that's been a very important step to take with customers as well, to see how and where we can find the money. And then you want to develop a short-term plan for quick wins, like cut down your mobile bill or aggregate your vendors into fewer so that you've got more money to work with, more cash in the bank, and then a long-term plan for what's the future of the organization and how they deliver service is going to look compared to where it is today. And lastly, I would say give them some food for thought before eliminating headcount. Think of which of those individuals can be pivoted to a more virtual role, like that sales associate at a store. Can they be a virtual sales associate? And I always mention that because as someone that oversees a big team of people within MetTel, it costs a lot more money to let someone go and then have to find a replacement than it does to just retrain someone who completely understands your product line, your processes. So before they go through, putting folks on either furlough or eliminating them, it's important to think are those people going to be part of that transformation message into a more virtual long-term business? So how do we help your customers do all this? We've been doing this on the mobility side of MetTel with the channel since we started the mobile program 10 years ago. We've been working with the channel in general on wireline services since 1996 and doing it very successfully over all those years. We added mobility around 10 years ago and have really grown the program to be very much a B2B or business-centric enterprise program that's had great success thanks to many of you in the channel that have worked with us and have had great success over the years. And what we always try to develop is a program that doesn't force someone's hand to go one way or another, but give them options. And that's really what we do as a mobile provider. We put ourselves in the shoes of the customer, and in this case, our average customer, when we engage with them, they're typically managing over 30 vendors just to be able to deploy something as simple as a mobile device. There's decisions they have to make throughout that process around which carriers to utilize and where. Most of them have multiple carriers because of coverage. There's typically not just a one carrier requirement in order to be able to support all the different regions and geographies of the customer. They also have to make decisions around device types. It might be simple for me or you to go to a local store and pick whatever device we want, but when that device becomes part of an organization's IT program, you have to make decisions around, well, if I'm going to give everyone an Apple device, do I have the know-how, the expertise, and the staff to support Apple devices? Do I know how to do enrollment here using Apple's DEP or device enrollment program, or do I need to hire expertise? What kind of security engines am I going to install on these devices? Because again, I think as Howard mentioned earlier, these mobile devices are now the new points of entry for hackers into your overall IT environment. So you need to be in a position where you're really protecting the environment and issuing devices that are completely secure. And what we really do for customers is we have the conversations with them. We make recommendations around, what's the best option for them to do a fast, efficient, and secure deployment. And that means give them access to all major carriers through our wholesale agreement. So wholesale agreement basically means savings because our buy price is lower than what they're being offered individually from the underlying carriers. And we're buying on behalf of around 8,000 major corporations. So we obviously have better economies of scale. But we're also looking at things like the equipment side. We are a direct service provider partner of Apple. We're, I believe, the 6th carrier in the country to have a direct Apple deal. So we keep a very large warehouse in Long Island City, New York, about 25,000 square feet of nothing but devices, tens of thousands of Apple devices and Samsung devices that we procure as well directly, and Google Pixel devices, and so on and so on. But give them the option of which devices do you want to deploy or which devices do you not want to deploy, and then we allow you to order any of the other ones. We also set up a program where every device that goes out is pre-configured. So once the end user gets the device and turns it on, it programs itself over the air, usually in 2 minutes or less, with all the security engines that it needs, the applications that specific user needs, all the security elements, as I mentioned, using mobile device management as an example, as well as anything like staging and kitting or a program to help them when they smash the screen on the device. And we offer it all under one umbrella, all those additional services I mentioned, like staging and kitting, also all part of our commission structure, but we offer it all under an umbrella. So when the customer ultimately clicks to order a device from us, they have this very seamless experience of knowing that that device ordered on our front end is going to be pre-enrolled in the right enrollment engine. It's going to have the security on it. It's going to have the specific applications for that user profile. So if it's someone in sales, maybe we preload the Salesforce app with credentials. If it's someone in operations, we preload their operational app or their in-house application for use. And they don't have to keep going from person to person to person within the organization just to get out something as simple as a mobile device. And we do all that through our front-end platform, our portal, which really gives the customer across all carriers a live interface. They can see live data use of the end users. It's pulling live API feeds of call details every 20 minutes from every carrier. They can activate, deactivate, suspend on all carriers live right from the same portal. And they can actually put in some business rules that actually help them manage their environment better. Things like any device that hasn't been used in 30 or 40 days, automatically put it in a suspend plan and the system will do it for them automatically, or anyone who uses over 10 gigs, put them in a suspend plan or upgrade them to a bigger plan. And that's really the secret to having a cost-effective, efficient solution. It's not just doing an analysis on a bill day one. It's having a program that every single month, either through automation or through people, actually makes it better, actually looks at usage, right sizes all the plans, eliminates lines that shouldn't be billed, and does all that from the provider, us in this scenario, before we cut the bill. So before we actually close out the bill and send the invoice out to the customer. And that's how we're able to not only show savings, but then maintain that level of savings long-term for our customers. And when I say customers, I would like to share with everyone, it's really in just about every vertical. We basically support when we do travel, how you travel, where you stay, where you eat, where you shop, where you get your health care, where you repair your car, and basically if you've ever used a debit card, the networks that flows over as well, those are all given within that network. The folks that work in those organizations all have mobile devices that were issued by Met-Tel as part of that program. So in each one of these verticals, we've seen a different need through COVID, and in each one of these verticals, we've seen an increase requirement through COVID. And that's really something that's obviously kept us incredibly busy over the last couple of months. But regardless of the vertical, we have a very vertical specific solution to a COVID problem as we've worked through these, and happy to share those as you engage us for a variety of different opportunities. And if you come across customers that say, well, you know, I'm not really sure if I want to move away from my retail representative at Verizon or AT&T, and I haven't worked with Met-Tel before, important to note, we're one of only few mobile providers to the federal government as well. In fact, we are one of only 3 providers that provide mobile services to FEMA, obviously been keeping us very busy through this pandemic, as well as for the Department of Defense. We're one of the largest contracts for the Department of Defense called Spiral 3, which is around a $900 million contract. And again, I'm speaking specifically for mobility services that we provide. And we have been recognized in many different publications, as well as on Gartner's most recent Magic Quadrant that actually came out as the pandemic started. We are the only U.S.-based carrier to qualify for this global report for managed mobility services. So very important to note on that as well. Just a couple of quick products in the short time we have left I want to educate you on. The concept of device as a service, we are working to make equipment cheaper for industry, and we've come up with some specific programs where as long as the corporation turns the device in during the refresh cycle, we're able to basically give them a device at 0% interest and give them some benefits of wiping the device at no additional cost. So something to certainly talk to us about. And the other one is what we call SDM, or software-defined mobility. This is really preparing companies to deal with the increase in usage by just limiting that network access to applications that they allow. This is the example I gave earlier with the school districts and having to restrict the LTE network on all carriers to just provide the sites that they allow within that vertical. It is a network-based controller. Most importantly, what it's going to do for your customers, and you need to have this conversation, it's going to get them 5G ready. And I'm not talking about in-building coverage. I'm talking about the fact that 5G speeds will increase average usage by 10 at a minimum. So if you've got users today on a 2 gig plan using 5 gigs because they're allowed to use things like Netflix and social networks, that 5 gigs is going to look more like 50 gigs when 5G devices start getting distributed to end users. So putting these controls in place now really allow them to protect themselves in the future. And just, you know, a quick summary slide to close up. If you haven't worked with us before, we support 8,000 plus business and government customers today. We have, and this is probably slide's a little old, we're over 800,000 mobile connections that we provide services for today to industry. And 98% of our process is fully automated, so we can scale up and scale down very quickly. And we do everything ourselves from a care perspective in the U.S. 24/7, 365, and ship all smart devices from our own owned and managed Smart Hands facility, a 25,000 square feet warehouse in our Long Island City warehousing location. And that is everything I was going to share today. So not sure if we have any time left for questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, it looks like we are just about out of time today. But before we go, I'd like to thank our presenters, Howard and Max, for that outstanding presentation. On behalf of channel partners and Mattel, have a great rest of your day.